Welcome in to another Running with the Wolves podcast on the Believe Sports Network. My name is Gabe Anderson, and I'm joined, as always, by Chris Emerson. Chris, how we doing?
We're doing good. We're playoffs, right? Playoff team. We got to love that.
Yeah, and first I want to start the show by saying, Minnesota fans, I know that it's a tough matchup against the Suns. But first of all, anyone is going to be a tough matchup. You got to beat them all. Second of all, how many years, and I know not recently, but how many years do we get to game 82 and it means nothing, and we basically just have to sit and watch the playoffs knowing that the Wolves are primed for a top 5 pick? A lot. So it's not time to get doom and gloom on the Wolves just because, they got a tough playoff matchup. How about just celebrate what we've done? And I know that the Wolves I've said all season that the Wolves haven't accomplished anything yet, but let's be honest, a top 3 spot in this tough Western Conference, in the toughest league in the entire NBA, that's accomplishing something. So now I know a first round exit would be devastating, but still, we got to stop and celebrate what we've done so far this year.
For sure. And I'll even take it a little further than that. So we're basically the first seed, the number 1 seed for all intents and purposes. We were the number 1 seed for 80% of the year. We're like half a game out. Like, that's a dominating performance. We've talked about it a couple times on here. The whole history of the Minnesota Timberwolves, we've sat at the top of the Western Conference for 7 days up until this year. And we must have been there. I haven't seen the numbers, but probably 80, 90 days, at the top. So that is a staggering improvement. 10 times more, 15 times more than the entire history of the Timberwolves all in 1 year. We went from a historically bottom 5 defense to the number 1 defense the whole year. That type of consistency, being able to stay at the top the whole year, that's a maturity. That's a taking care of the business. That's a beating up on the little teams that we got, where you can kind of be mentally relaxed on. So much professionalism. All this is being built into our younger players, Anthony Edwards, Naz Reid, McDaniels, all those guys, Alexander Walker. So, I would say even if we lose in the first round, even if we get swept in the first round, yes, it'd be devastating, but it doesn't mean the year wasn't a huge success over what it's been. I mean, we're putting our stamp on like a franchise that's a successful, consistent franchise now with the type of play we had this year. I think that's huge. Like, not just a fluke team that sneaks in. Like, we're one of the teams that teams will have to look out for every year.
So let's talk about it a little bit. The Phoenix Suns coming in. Obviously, let's just get these stats out of the way. Obviously, the Suns have dominated us so far this season. In games we played, the Suns have shot 48% from 3. We've only shot 29% from 3. The average margin of victory in those games was 15.6. And another big thing, the Suns outscored us by an average of 13.3 points in the first quarter. Of course, the Phoenix Suns, a good first quarter team, 5th in the league in first quarter margin. But what I will say about that is a luxury that Coach Finch has not had in the entire run with the Minnesota Timberwolves. He's never had an entire week to prepare for a playoff team. The first year against Memphis, they played on a Tuesday. They played again on that Saturday. Didn't have time to get everything ready, and even went on to win game 1. Of course, last year went from the Thursday win, or maybe even Friday, I don't remember, to playing on Sunday. So, and another thing, you look at the stats and go, wow, the Suns have dominated the Wolves. 2 of those games, and I'm not making full excuses on this, 2 of those games were on back-to-back, and 1 of those games were on 1 day's rest. So I'm not saying it's everything, but it could be a contributing factor to how bad the Wolves were shooting and defensively in those games.
Yeah, I mean, like they always say, it's a make or miss league, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and say the Suns aren't gonna shoot 50% from three the whole series, you know. And if they
Mhm.
do, we're gonna lose. You know, I'll tell you that right now. You know,
I
like
think I think any team would
if
lose.
if that happens, exactly. And that's the thing. Like if a team gets hot and you've got three first ballot Hall of Famers that are all near their prime, it's gonna be ugly. You know, the Suns have the firepower. And I mean, they're kind of in a way like the Timberwolves of maybe even last year more than this year, where they have all the talent, you know, like roster wise, but they just weren't quite meshing. Um, Sometimes when it's not meshing and stars try to go ISO mode or feel like they haven't got their shots or they want to put a stamp on this playoff series or this playoff game, they get a little ahead of themselves and it's to the detriment of the team. Let's hope
Mhm.
some of that happens for Phoenix, and let's hope the Timberwolves can be the opposite. Let's hope Carl Anthony Towns doesn't try to put his stamp on this playoffs and just plays within the system. Same with Anthony Edwards, same with everybody.
Mhm.
um we just have to play smart and play our game, and let the chips fall where they may. Like you said, the Suns are a bad matchup, but I mean the Lakers are best fire. We probably don't want to mess with them right now either. We've got Denver, you've got OKC. Those teams are tough. You don't want to mess with them. The Pelicans have been kind of a tough matchup for us with Zion, so like that wouldn't have been the perfect matchup. Like it gets down to the point where you're
Mhm.
like, well, all the teams aren't great matchups because it's the playoffs. Like they're supposed to be good.
Right.
So, you're going to have to beat everybody if you want to win it all. So let's start with the Suns.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a few more stats on the Phoenix Suns. Devin Booker, a career 17-8 against the Timberwolves, but a lot of those losses for the Suns were early on in his career when the Suns were not really doing anything. One stat that sticks out to me, the Suns have won as a team 10 in a row against the Minnesota Timberwolves. We have not beaten the Suns since 2021. So it's been a little bit, but obviously we haven't played them in postseason basketball. What do you think changes the most between the regular season and postseason? Things get a little tighter, but what do you think changes the most?
Well, refereeing is tends to be, they let stuff play a little more, which normally is a great thing for us because, we've got quote unquote the big guys where you would think that that's where a lot of it is. But a lot of our big guys don't really, play that big. So I would say refereeing is probably one thing, but, rosters get a little smaller, like instead of playing 10 guys, 9 guys, we might play 7 guys,
Mhm.
and there's some guys on our roster that I'd be more than happy to sit out for this series.
Now, the one question that I've been seeing in our group chat and everything, given the camaraderie and how well he's played, do you think there's any chance? Now, I don't think that Finch is going to start this way. Do you think there's any chance that Cat moves to the bench in favor of Nas? Do you think there's any way Coach Finch does that? And do you think that's a good idea?
First off, I think it's a great idea. Second off, I think Finch would do it. I don't think that he's opposed to it at all. I don't think he has a care for feelings as much as winning and losing,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to playoffs. I think what would have to happen though is I think Carl Anthony Towns would have to come to the coach and say, "Hey, you guys are really humming. I don't quite feel like I'm quite up to that speed yet. Maybe it would be best if I did this." I think something like that would be the only way that it would really happen, unless we go down 0-3 or something. Um, but I do think it's the best way, and I'm not. It's not news to anyone who's been consistently watching this that I that I would rather have Nas start and Cat either traded or coming off the bench.
Yeah, for sure. But it is hard. Uh, Let me say this: it is hard to when the other team has three perennial all stars. it is hard to put one of your all-stars on the bench. And I
Yes.
know I know a lot of it is, like you said, for the benefit of the team, but just the scoring power of Karl Anthony Towns when he's on. I mean, this is a guy who has the potential to go off for 60 points any night. Like he's done it. He's done 50 twice in his career. He's one of the
Mhm.
best shooting big men's in the entire league. And
Yeah.
it's tough to do that when the other side you have Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. It's tough to do
Right.
it, but it may be necessary.
Yeah, and I mean, without getting too much into anything negative right now, I will tell you, I think that a lot of Karl Anthony Towns' points, a lot of this points he scores comes at a detriment of the team. Um, Whereas you might score 50 points, but if you would have played team offense, the team would have scored 55 in those same amount of shots. Something kind of like that. I think I think he's very talented. I just don't know if he plays in the team system that helps us win the best.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Whereas if he came off the bench, he can be green light 100% of the time. And I think that's the way he would like it. But yeah, he's a supreme talent, and we got to find a way to make it work. And it does start and I think end with Karl Anthony Towns. I think he needs to find a way to attack his matchup, which if they're going to defend him with Grayson Allen and Karl Anthony Towns doesn't drop 35 on him every game,
Right.
he needs to be traded, because that right there tells me that you are not who you think you are, because Grayson Allen is a very average guard defender, and he sure as hell should not be able to defend a 7-footer in the post.
Now, in past playoff series, we've seen, particularly in Utah, not necessarily with us, we've seen Rudy Gobert kind of get overtaken by other guys and sometimes benched in the playoffs. That's always been his MO. He's great in the regular season, can't perform in the playoffs. And so far this season against the Suns, we had a good game last game on what was that, Sunday. He had a good game with 21 points, but he's a combined 68 minus and had 2 points in 2 games. Is there any chance? Now I know we talked about Nas coming off or Nas being switched out with Cat. Could you see Nas and Cat both starting, putting Rudy off the bench, or does that not make any sense?
Let's see. So they've got, I forget his name, but Nurkic's a pretty
Nurkic.
tough, big, thick center type guy. Nurkic, he's tough to deal with. He's a handful. Who I don't think Karl Anthony Towns would be very successful versus him um
That's
offensively.
true. Yeah, that's a
Uh,
good point.
so now we've got yeah, I don't think it would work. Like, I think part of the problem is Nurk is a handful. Like, he's a big, rough, rugged guy, and he's going to be a handful for a lot of different players. I think that bringing Rudy off the bench would almost be bringing us not would almost be diminishing any of his positives.
Hmm.
Um, and I think we still need that impact off the bench, because one thing, like we've been saying on this podcast all year, is scoring is our problem. Like, when you
Yep.
start Rudy and you start Jaden and you start Mike Conley, those are three guys that are gonna not give you much. Like, those
Hmm.
three guys combined a game very often can score you, 15 to 20 points combined between all three of them in a game. Like, that's not enough. And then one of our main guys off the bench is Slow Mo, who, give you 7 if he gets hot. So, like,
Right.
we don't have any real scoring other than Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns and Nas. So those three guys are going to have to average 20 each all series. It's going to be huge for Nas to be very productive. Cat can't have any down games, and Edwards has to be efficient. Like, it's going to be tough, but it's supposed to be.
Hmm. So we talk about why that the Wolves are a bad matchup with the Phoenix Suns. In the games that you've watched, why is that? Is it just bad shooting? Is it because Like you mentioned, the Suns have 3 potential Hall of Famers. Bradley Beal for the Hall of Fame, it's questionable to me. I think if he gets some rings going, like if he wins a couple championships, maybe. But I think Booker's a lock, and obviously Kevin Durant is a lock. Why do you think, in the regular season at least, have the Suns been such a bad matchup for us?
Part of the problem, and again, don't want to be negative, but part of the problem that with a lot of these things with us is I saw earlier in the year, not too long ago, that we were the worst shooting team versus switches in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
Which seems strange. Like that's kind of a strange stat. But I thought about it more. I'm like, well, why would that be? Like obviously Anthony Edwards loves a switch and he'll attack it. But who doesn't love a switch is Karl Anthony Towns because he can't attack smalls very well. So like
Mm-hmm.
when you defend him with the small, a lot of times he tries to start his post up versus them at the 3-point line. And you're not going to back a guy down,
Mm-hmm.
18 feet. That just doesn't happen
No.
before help comes and stuff. So I think a lot of it is our bigs don't play big versus the Suns. So they can't punish them for defending them with smalls. And then our bigs can't defend their smalls. Like if Grayson Allen's flying around off pin downs, Karl Anthony Towns can't chase that. And since we've got Jaden McDaniels at 7 foot guarding their point guard, that means that our point guard has to guard somebody that's their small forward. Like sometimes it's not always great to have a small forward that can defend a center, um, unless you or defend a point guard, unless you also don't have a point guard. You know what
Right.
I mean? Like
Right.
that guy that we have has to defend somebody. So the matchups get all switched up, and it doesn't work very well. I don't know what the exact answer is. Do we go small or do we go big? But I don't think we can go small to match up with a team that has 3
Mm-mm.
Hall of Famers playing that way. I think the best thing we can do is go big and hope that our bigs can play big and rebound, block shots, and punish people in the paint.
Yeah, because I mean, on paper, we should out rebound them. We should outshoot them, particularly from behind the 3-point line, because we know that Booker and Durant love the mid range shot. And I think that's a reason maybe Rudy Gobert hasn't been too successful. His blocks are down as well against the Phoenix Suns because they're taking so many mid range jumpers that's not exactly where Rudy is
Yep.
on the defense. He's more about protecting the paint. And don't get me wrong, Devin Booker will attack the paint every so
Yeah.
often, but they're more about mid-range shooting, which could be a detriment to them if they get too in love with that and the Wolves are hitting threes. That could be a way that we could slow them down. If the Wolves are hitting threes, trading threes for twos.
Well, I mean, the thing that's like you said earlier about Chris Finch having an entire week to set up, I think is going to be huge because
Mm-hmm.
when you catch a team that's like you said, very strong mid-range team, I think Booker and Durant were like both in the top probably 5 in mid-range shots of the year. Um, the problem is our whole defense is scheduled to force people to take mid-range shots. We protect the rim and we chase them off the 3-point line. So if that's what we've been doing all year, we're not going to change it up for a Tuesday game in Phoenix. And if we're forcing these guys to these mid-range shots, well, they're going to eat those up because that's the shots they want. So
Mm-hmm.
we're going to have to change up our defense some way to eliminate that. So we'll see. I mean, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a chess match. But the number one thing I want to see more than anything is Karl Anthony Towns to catch the ball in the block on the move. I want him to be, kind of on a cut where Grayson Allen's following him or whatever, and he stops in the paint and catches the ball there and starts his action there. Post up Grayson Allen 6 feet from the cup. Don't
Mm-hmm.
post him up 20 feet from the cup.
Yep.
Like, what are you doing? That's pointless. So if we can establish that right away, I mean, first 5 possessions, 3 of them should be Karl Anthony Towns hook shots over Grayson Allen, make or miss, and
Mm-hmm.
force them out of that. Make them start, some taller bum to try to counteract our height. But
Mm-hmm.
if we don't make them uncomfortable at their small size, we're going to lose, and we're probably going to lose pretty quick in this series.
Yeah, I would agree. Now, someone else who needs to play pretty big, and he did in last year's playoffs, obviously wasn't enough to beat the Nuggets, but we were shorthanded. I feel like Nikhil Alexander Walker and his length is going to be very important, particularly against a guy who's super lengthy in Durant and then Booker as well. They say that offense wins in the regular season, but defense wins in the playoffs. And there's our shot right there. If this team can play defense and avoid giving the Suns a 10 to 13 spot in the first quarter, because
Yeah.
honestly, looking at it, we've been pretty even with them after first quarters. Now,
Yes.
obviously, things got away in the fourth quarter on Sunday, but this team needs to ride the momentum, come out of the gates quick, punch them in the mouth in game one. Because I think if we lose game one, I think the momentum all goes to the Phoenix Suns, knowing, okay, we got particularly if we get killed in game one, the momentum completely goes to the Phoenix Suns. Now, a bad stat for the Timberwolves, I did the math on this. Wolves all time in game ones, what do you think their record is? What would you guess? Of 13 game, they've had 13 game ones in their history. What do you think their record is?
Well, knowing that we've made it out of the first round one time in the history of the franchise, I'm gonna guess under 20%,
Two and
25% maybe.
2-11, 2-11.
That's close. 25%. Yeah, that's, I mean, I believe it because most of those games have probably been on the road. Um, yeah, we got to do better. We got to do better. And we've got to do it our style. We got to play our style. Like I saw people saying, well, we should go small and we should start Connolly, Alexander Walker, Edwards, Jaden, and Rudy. And that would be a great defensive team. And that would be cool. But we have to score points, man. Like, unless Anthony
Right,
Edwards is going for 55, that's going to be a tough, you're not getting many buckets out of that roster. So,
right.
the good thing is we have perimeter defenders. Like, that's something, we have enough perimeter defenders to match up with them throughout the game. They don't always have to be out there at the same time. It's going to be a big Chris Finch game, how he's going to be able to manage this. It's going to be a big Karl Anthony Towns game to prove that he is a superstar. And it's going to be a big Rudy Gobert game to see if he can influence a playoff game like a lot of people say that he can't. I'm not in that realm. I think that he's got a bad rap based off, having some really bad perimeter defenders that he's had to cover up for in Utah.
I agree. So I'm going to put you on the spot right now. Give me
I
your
like
prediction. Give me the prediction for the series. Who in how many games?
If I had to put uncomfortable amount of money on it, I would say Suns in 6.
Okay.
Unfortunately, and truthfully, a lot of that comes down to, I think the way that they're going to play defense, they're going to take Anthony Edwards completely out of the game. And I think if Anthony Edwards is out of the game, I don't think we have anyone else on our roster, top to bottom, that can create offense at all. I think that Karl Anthony Towns can catch and shoot, one of the best in the NBA. He can catch and maybe, straight line drive, attack a closeout, but he's not driving and kicking. He's not, setting up players where in their sweet spot. Jaden McDaniels has proven that he cannot step up and be a scorer. Connolly is past his prime in that. I think if you take the ball out of Anthony Edwards' hands, I think that we're kind of dead in the water at this point as a roster, because we have no one that can create offense with the ball in their hand.
Well, I'm going to go the other way. And
Nice.
I know that I've said all these stats that support the Suns. I mean, they've won 10 in a row against us. I didn't even say this stat yet. Durant is a career 37-9 against the Timberwolves. Now, obviously, he's had some good players around him, but still, 37-9 doesn't really lie. We've never played Durant in the playoffs. You know what? I'm going to stay positive here. Let's go Wolves in 7.
Nice. I'll take it.
Let's say we do it at home. I know it's going to be tough to beat this team 4 times, which is what we're going to have to do. But and that is contingent. We need to win game 1. I really think we need to win game 1. Put the Suns on their heels, protect home court. Because, I mean, that is, to their credit, the Wolves have been great at home this season. And I just think, and I know they're going to try to take Anthony Edwards out of the game, but I think that Anthony Edwards goes to a whole new mode in the playoffs. I mean, he averaged 31 points per game last playoffs. That's close to Luka Doncic, and we know how ball heavy Luka Doncic is with his team. I think that Karl Anthony Towns comes back and starts hitting the three. And like you said, it's going to be important for him to attack in the low post and dominate his matchup if he is going to be against Grayson Allen.
He also has to shoot quick. When the ball swings to you, shoot it immediately or pass it immediately.
Yeah.
This whole like dribble, like try to do something cool. Don't let their defense set up. Like the way that they're going to attack Anthony Edwards is putting pretty much 3 on him, like 1 guy on him and 2 guys half watching him. So like to break that, you've got to have a hard swing and a shot and make. Like you got to make guys stay home. So we'll see. We need it. We need Cat so bad.
I know. And I'm just deciding to stay positive here. I think Wolves in 7. Well, nice. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. And also make sure to give us a like, share, and subscribe as well. And give us a 5-star rating on Spotify. We're going to be covering all of the Wolves playoff run here. We'll try to break down as many games as we can. We'll probably even do a podcast more this week, breaking down the rest of the playoffs as well, kind of do an NBA-centered show. But Chris, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, no problem, man. Enjoy this beautiful spring weather.
Absolutely. And this is the Running with the Wolves podcast on the Believe Sports Network. Like I said, give us a 5-star rating, like, share, and subscribe on YouTube. And as always, go Wolves.